Okay, so let's start with generalizing transformations. And also we're going to have a short introduction to absolute value. So here we have two tables, f of x and h of x. We're going to do two things. First, we're going to describe the transformations, and then we're going to write the function rule for h of x in terms of f. Keeping in mind these two key facts. A change in x, or your domain, is h. Remember, we add h to x. H changes the domain. And if we see a change in y value, that is k, because we add k to y. So let's start by comparing the x columns of both functions. And when I look at these two functions, and I look at the x values, notice that we're going up by 5. 1 plus 5 is 6. 4 plus 5 is 9. 9 plus 5 is 14. And 16 plus 5 is 21. So that means that h equals 5. And when h equals 5, the function moves to the right, 5 units. Let's do the same thing with the range. So we start with 16, it decreases to 13. 9 decreased to 6. 4 decreased to 1, and 1 decreased to -2. So they're going down by 3. We're subtracting 3. So that means that k is -3. And when k equals -3, it moves down 3 units. So when I write my function rule, h of x in terms of f, we have the function f being moved to the right 5. So I'm going to put a 5 in for h and down by 3. Let's do the same thing with the graph. Here we have the function f of x. And now we're going to graph g of x. Well, let's look at the two transformations that we need to do to f of x in order to achieve g of x. Well, first of all, we should see that h equals -2. So, because h equals -2, I need to shift the graph left 2. And then I also know that k is +2. So I need to also move the graph up 2. So let's do that. So I'm going to create some points just to make it easier to transform. And I'm going to take these 5 points, move them all to the left 2 and up 2, and then redraw. So starting here, I move this point to the left 2 and up 2. I am right there. This point has been transformed. So now let's do the same thing with our second point. Left 2, up 2. Repeat. Left 2, up 2. Left 2, up 2. And left 2, up 2. So when we draw our shape, that is now the function g of x. So this is g of x. And this is our f of x. So now let's talk about absolute value. What is absolute value? Absolute value is the distance from zero. So when we look at the number +6, +6 is how far from zero. How many jumps do I have to make to get from +6 back to zero? Well, if we look at our number line, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the answer is 6. +6 is 6 hops away from zero. Well, there's actually another number that has the same absolute value or the same number of hops away from zero, and that is -6. When we look at -6, even though it's coming from the left, it still has the same distance, 3, 4, 5, 6. So when looking at this equation, this is asking us what two numbers can I put inside of the absolute value that have a distance of 6? And there's two answers. The first answer is x equals 6, and the second answer is x equals -6. There are two numbers that have the same absolute value. No matter where you are on the number line, there is another number on the opposite side of zero that has the same absolute value. So what does that mean for number 2, or our second example? So we have, what two numbers will give us an absolute value of 3.4? Well, 3.4 is in between +3 and +4. And if I hop 0.4, 1, 2, 3, that means that 3.4 is 3.4 hops away from zero, but also -3.4 is the same distance from zero. So what are the two numbers that have an absolute value of 3.4? Well, x equals +3.4 and x equals -3.4. So let's look at this last example. What number has an absolute value of -2? Are you thinking +2? Well, unfortunately, that is not correct, because absolute value and distance is always positive. Absolute value is always positive. So what that means is, if I'm trying to find a number that is -2 hops away from zero, that number does not exist. So that's actually a trick question. This does not exist. There is no answer that has an absolute value of -2. So remember, when we're solving absolute value and graphing absolute value, there are two numbers that have the same absolute value, one positive, one negative, and also the absolute value has to be positive.